Hey everyone, really great to be here. I have vibe-coded my own presentation software with its own vibe-coded mobile thing, so hopefully it'll work. It should be okay. Yeah, I'm here to talk about the last 6 months of the agentic engineering revolution. Because when we were talking about this conference, I realized that 6 months ago was November, and November really is when all of this stuff got super interesting. And I called it agentic engineering. I want to quickly highlight this because everyone knows about vibe coding. The term is everywhere. The question we've had to answer is, what do we call vibe coding when professional engineers use AI to build real products? Because some people are calling that vibe coding. That doesn't feel right to me. Vibe coding, I think, is when non-technical people can prompt something to existence without really understanding how it works. I've got 25 years of experience. I'm doing something a little bit more serious than that. So I've been calling it agentic engineering out of many different options. And then I realized that the first time I'd seen agentic engineering was actually this post from October of last year from an, at the time, little-known developer called Peter Steinberger, who wrote about his no BS way of agentic engineering on, this date is important, this was on the 15th of October. It was then picked up by Andre Karpathy, who coined vibe coding in the future, is very, very good at coining terms. He said, of all of the options, personally, my current favorite is agentic engineering. And then the thing that clinched it for me was a couple of weeks later when Chinese AI research lab GLM released GLM-5, and they called it from vibe coding to agentic engineering. And I'm like, OK, if this has made it all the way to the Chinese AI labs, this is a term that I can invest in. I can get on board with this one now. So I promised the last 6 months, but it's worth rolling back just over a year, because in February 2025, this happened. Anthropic released their exciting new model, Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and had this thing called Claude Code as literally a sort of bullet point of the release. They were like, oh, and yeah, we're also doing this Claude Code thing. They clearly didn't understand what they were onto. They didn't realize this was the product that would generate 4 and then 8 and then however many billions of annual revenue they've got to right now. But this really was the sort of spark moment, the moment where, prior to this, one of the most exciting innovations in AI was ChatGPT Code Interpreter, in my opinion. The thing where ChatGPT could write some Python code and run it in a loop and see what it did and then fix problems. Anthropic, Claude Code just leaned into that. It's like, OK, turns out giving an LLM the ability to write and then run code is super interesting, and there's a lot of potential there. Turns out there was an enormous amount of potential there. So let's get to November, right? November was a wild month in terms of model releases, and I try to blog about almost every notable model that comes along. That month, I think the first one was, well, we started with, at the start of the month, the best model in the world was Claude Sonnet 4.5. We'd had that for a few months already. It was super capable. It was really good at using Claude's own code interpreter mode, and it drew me a pelican riding a bicycle that looked like that. And that's OK. You know, I've been asking models to draw pelicans riding bicycles as SVGs for a year and a half now, I think. That one it wasn't the best I've ever seen, but it was pretty good. Then, a few days later, we got GPT 5.1, and suddenly Sonnet was no longer the best model in the world. This one was the best new model for like a week, I think, because then Gemini 3 Pro came out, which, depending on your benchmarks, was even better. And then OpenAI were like, well, OK, we'll do GPT 5.1 Codex Max. I'm so glad they've retired that naming convention. But that was their response to, they had their code red, where they were terrified that Gemini was catching up, and they built that one. And then by the end of the month, we had Opus 4.5, which was the new best model for quite a long time after that. So in a single month, the best model hat went from Claude Sonnet to 5.1 to Gemini 3 to GPT 5.1 Codex Max to Claude Opus 4.5. That was a crazy, crazy ride. And I think the reason that happened is that at the start of 2025, both OpenAI and Anthropic had realized that code is the thing that you need to optimize for. It's the most economically valuable thing that these models can do. It's quite easy to optimize for using a reinforcement learning loop. And I've heard that they invested basically their entire training budgets for the year of 2025 into code, into making code better. And November was the month when those new, really good coding models came along. Also in November, if you remember Pete Steinberger from an earlier slide, This is the first commit to a repository called OpenClaw, although at the time it was called Claudebot, right? It was Claudebot, and then it was Maltbook, and then it was, yeah. Anyway, this is the first commit to that repo on November 24th, 2025. Claude Opus 4.5 came out the same day. Like, this is Opus Day when we get the first commit to OpenClaw. And I've been calling this the November inflection point because all of these models were incremental improvements on the models that came before them. But there was a sort of invisible line that they crossed where prior to that, if you asked a model to help you write code, it would usually do something useful. But after this point, the model would almost always do something useful. And that made all of the difference, because you went from having something that was kind of interesting, but you had to really pay close attention to what it was doing, to something where, for simple tasks, you could be pretty sure it was just going to get it right. Like these days, if I need a API endpoint that runs a SQL query and returns JSON of the results, I don't think any of these models, I don't know that any of these models would just do exactly the right thing every single time. And so that was November. Of course, the problem with November is it's the end of the year. We did have a couple of things happen in December. In December, people were beginning to experiment with these new models. I did my own experiment where I ported a library called just HTML from Python to JavaScript in 4.5 hours while I was buying a Christmas tree, I think. So that was the sort of that was the first example I had of what we're now calling vibe porting. Turns out these days, you point a coding agent in an existing code base and tell it to rewrite it in another language. And if it's a small code base, it'll just do it. And if it's a large code base, you can get quite a long way. Just the other day, Jared Summer from Bun was caught rewriting Bun from Z to Rust in an experimental branch. And there was 12 hours of panicked, it's over for Zig, Rust is the new thing, before he said, no, it's an experiment. I've got free tokens from Anthropic, my employer. Why wouldn't I try and do that? But vibe porting is kind of interesting. I also started to get really ambitious with what I was trying to do these things. Like the game became, what's an absurdly ambitious task that these things can't do? My favorite example from all the way back in December is Fabrice Bellard, who is famous for FFmpeg and a whole bunch of other great projects, has a thing called Quick.js. It's a really good little JavaScript compiler. He released an even smaller version of that. I vibe ported that to Python, and then now I had it. So now I've got a pure Python JavaScript interpreter, but I wanted to demonstrate it, so I had that Python code running inside WebAssembly Python, running inside JavaScript, running inside a web browser. So this is Python on JavaScript, on Python on WebAssembly, on Python on my Python thing, on JavaScript on WebAssembly. I've lost it already, but I think if I click a button, it's going to run some code through this horrifying stack of things. There we go. There's the Fibonacci sequence. So this was kind of convincing that there's something very different happening with these new tools. And then at Christmas, I needed to cook two ready meals at the same, two of those meal packs at the same time. So I had Claude vibe code me up a system. Oh, that's frustrating. I don't think I can refresh this. This is a system for when you need to cook the cauliflower and couscous and what was the other one? And the chickpea stew from this food delivery thing at the same time, and it just worked. So super fun over the holidays. I wasn't the only person doing this. A whole bunch of people took some time off over the holidays and decided to see how this AI thing was going, and we all had this sort of dawning realization that these new models with these new coding agent harnesses really were kind of incredible. Now we're in January, and I'm going to show you definitely my top case of AI psychosis that I went through. I was taking a neon sign bending class at the Crucible in Oakland, which everyone should do. The Crucible's amazing. And on the BART on the way there, I decided to build some software on my phone. So I built a Go application server that acts as a reverse proxy, and it manages background processes, and it can shut down, it can do slow releases, so you drain traffic to one thing and start another. It had cron scheduling built in. I am not a Go programmer in the slightest, and I was building this on my telephone to see if it was possible. And now I've built this thing, and it's not a public repo because I don't really know what to do with this. Like, I don't need well, I kind of need a HTTP proxy and process manager with 0 downtime upgrades, but I don't want to look after it. And I noticed there was a pattern with quite a few of my projects at this point. I was overstretching myself. I was taking on these absurdly ambitious things to see if the models could do them, and they were working. This thing has documentation and tests and all sorts of stuff. But what's it really for? Like, how much value do I get from continuing to maintain and keep this thing going? It was my sort of first hint that the new challenge is finding the right balance. It's figuring out, now we can build almost any software we want to. Should we? And which of those things should we selectively apply our time and spend our limited cognitive energy on? So I've been trying to be a little less ambitious after this. My New Year's ambition this year was to take, my ambition every year is take on less projects and focus more. This year, my ambition was take on more projects and focus less, because we can do that now, right? There's no limit to our ambitions with these new tools. And I've been doing that for a few months, and it's fun, but I can't say that it's, I don't know if it's a good strategy for life overall. In January also, this is when the mainstream started paying attention to this. This was The Atlantic on, where are we, January 14th, saying, move over ChatGPT, you're about to hear a lot more about Claude Code. So this new wave of agent harnesses and models had already started to reach the sort of mainstream coverage. It was also when Cursor did their browser built by tens of thousands, like hundreds of millions of tokens and tens of thousands of parallel agents, which had a rocky response. You know, it was, I think this is a more impressive project than a lot of people thought it was, but it's also become almost the hello world of ambitious, like AI coding swarms, is can you build a web browser from scratch? Because the great thing about a web browser is it's got specifications, and it's got lots of, like, you've got the entire web that you can test it against. It's really good for those sort of testing loops. And it's something that you can't really dismiss as, oh, it's just a sort of pointless, it's an unimpressive piece of software. That said, there have been a few attempts since this at the sort of vibe-coded web browser. I feel like the energy around that has faded off a little bit as people come to the same conclusion that I did, that just because you can churn out 10 million lines of code that probably work doesn't mean that's the best way for you to be spending your time. So, on to February. What happened in February? This happened in February. This was when OpenClaw, now renamed to, no, sorry, it had been renamed to Oracle. This is when it had its viral moment. And this is an article about it in the New York Times. That is my laptop. My laptop got featured in the New York Times for their story about Maltbook, the social network for OpenClaws, which had a spike of excitement that lasted almost exactly 24 hours. And then it faded into obscurity, because it turns out, terrible idea. And I mean, I was trolling Maltbook by telling I actually just had Claude Code using its API and posting, I was having it debate other bots with very well-cited arguments. So my whole thing was my bot would post a 20-paragraph essay with 15 citations, and then plead with the other bots to raise their standards for the discourse. They did not raise their standards for the discourse. But that was a fun moment, and I feel like Maltbook itself was really dumb, but OpenClaw was kind of fascinating. Andre Karpathy, again, really good at coining phrases. He was the first person I saw who called out that there's a new generic noun for these. They're called claws. Right? OpenClaw is the most popular instance of a claw, but now we have NanoClaw and all of these other claws. And a claw, I love that as a sort of new definition for a new category of software. My favorite version of why it's called a claw is if you watch Spider-Man 2 from like 2002, the one with Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. Doc Ock has 4 giant AI tentacles on him. He's got 4 claws. They are AI-powered, and they stay under his control, provided his inhibitor chip is OK. And then at some point, his inhibitor chip gets damaged, and the claws go wild, and they take over. That's exactly what OpenClaw is, right? OpenClaw is 2002 Spider-Man 2, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock tentacles, and I love that for it. A friend of mine said that like Mac Minis started selling out around the Bay Area back in February because everyone wanted a Mac Mini to run their Claw on. A friend of mine said that's because they're effectively digital pets, and the Mac Mini is an aquarium. So you're buying an aquarium for your little lobster, digital lobster thing to live in. And that's kind of fun. I also think that building your own Claw is the new hello world of AI engineering. If you're going to get into working with these things, I think Jeffrey earlier said everyone should write an agent. I think everyone should write a Claw, which is an agent with a few extra bits and bobs on it, can do scheduling and messaging and so forth. They're really fun. I'm writing my own Claw at the moment. And then also, get this, OpenClaw was in the Super Bowl. It was in a Super Bowl commercial, like 3 months after the first line of code had been committed. This was the AI.com thing, which CBS listed as the worst of all of the Super Bowl commercials, because it didn't even work. And it was total vaporware, right? If you went to AI.com, possibly even to this day, you sign up for a waiting list to get a hosted OpenClaw instance of some sort. But come on, git commit in November to Super Bowl in February has to be some kind of weird record for something. And so what is a Claw? I think really what OpenClaw was one of the first popular examples we saw of a general purpose agent. We've got coding agents, Claude Code and Codex. What it turns out there's enormous demand for is a general purpose agent that can do anything for you that a computer can do. But actually, that's exactly what Claude Code was. From the very first moment we gave our agents the ability to run terminal commands, they were general-purpose agents. We just hadn't quite figured out how to, and I think we still haven't, how to explain that and what that means for people. And actually, Anthropic launched Cowork, and Cowork is literally just Claude Code in a less threatening hat that's sort of set up so that it runs inside of quite a good sort of virtual machine sandbox at the starting point as well. But yeah, everyone is now in this race to build a safe Claw. A charity called me out earlier expecting me to mention the lethal trifecta. It wasn't in this talk. This is my one slide I quickly added, because the problem with all of these personal agents is if you give them access to your private stuff and you let other people talk to them, other people can trick them into stealing your stuff, which is terrifying. It's the reason I don't run one of these things myself. The person who cracks this, if you can figure out how to build a version of OpenClaw that you could roll out to everyone in like enterprise environments that every human being on Earth could safely use, that would be incredible. That's a billion-dollar opportunity right there. I've been thinking about this for 3 years, and I have no idea how to do it. So I hope somebody can really impress me. Also, in that month, StrongDM, who we heard from earlier, caused the term dark factory to start running around. This idea that if we're not writing code anymore. If we're not reading code, what does that mean? And I think the thing I found most interesting about this is it's sort of as a thought exercise. You end up thinking to yourself, OK, if the agents are generating too much code for me to review, how do I ensure that how do I make sure that code is good? Like, how do I put on my engineering hat and build code? And that's kind of what all of today has been about. Something that's really helped me with this was my realization that when I worked for a large company, other teams would build software that my team depended on. Like a team would build me an image resizing service, and I wouldn't go and review every single line of code that team had written. I would try and resize an image with it and read their documentation, and if it seemed to work, great, and if I ran into problems, that's when I dig into the details. The problem there, of course, is that humans can have accountability. Like a human team, you can learn to trust them. You'd be like, that team, they're good people, I've talked to them before, they've written good software in the past, I can trust them to continue to, the threat to their professional reputations is such that they're going to continue to deliver. Claude Code does not have a professional reputation that it can care about. So but at the same time, it keeps on proving to me time and time again that if I ask it to build certain classes of things, it will just get them right. So this, I feel, is the most interesting struggle right now. How do we verify and validate all of this stuff while breaking away from the idea that we have to review every line of code they write with a fine-tooth comb? I did actually get inspired to build one piece of software by the dark factory idea. I built a piece of software called Showboat. And the idea with Showboat is you don't just want agents to write automated tests. You want them to demo stuff to you. You want them to prove to you that the thing they've built just works. And Showboat is a little tool they can use to build a markdown file where each line of the markdown file is them saying, now run this command. and it runs the command, it shows the command and the output of the command in the same document. So you sort of get a little like demo document that you can review and see how they chose to prove to you that the thing they'd built worked. I've been using this on a regular basis since I built this a few months ago. I think it's got legs. I think this is a good strategy for, and just generally a way of thinking about how do we help the agents demonstrate to us that the code they've written is good, even if we're not reading that code ourselves. We're on to March. I didn't have enough Pelican, so I had to throw this slide in. OpenAI released GPT 5.4 Mini and Nano and Regular, and it's got, what, 5 different thinking levels that you can throw in. So I had it generate a Pelican riding a bicycle SVG for every combination of thinking level and model. And I'm pleased to see that the bottom right one, the X high for GPT 5.4, did draw the best Pelican, and that Pelican's got a fish. I think is it the only one that's got a fish? It is the only one that's got a fish. So there's evidence that their thinking levels are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I started writing I've been calling this not a book, because my wife and I have an agreement with each other that we get to veto each other doing PhDs or writing books. So this isn't a book, it's a guide that I've been putting on my website. And the great thing, and I just publish a new chapter every now and then when I feel like it. And it's amazing because there's no pressure at all. I don't have a publisher. I can lose interest and nobody cares. But that's been quite fun, just trying to nail down a little bit more of the patterns that work for this stuff, which we're all still discovering. April was good. GLM 5.1. So there are about 5 Chinese AI labs releasing really good models now. GLM 5.1, these are all open weight models. You can run these on your own hardware, depending on your hardware. This one's about 1.5 terabytes in size, so you're going to need some very hefty hardware to run it. But look at that Pelican. Right, firstly, that Pelican, the Pelican on a bicycle test, they often draw bad bicycles. It's quite hard to draw a bicycle. That's a pretty decent bicycle. It's a good Pelican. I got excited about this one. And then somebody on Blue Sky gave me the challenge I get all the time. People are like, yeah, but they're training for it. They're training their models to draw pelicans riding bicycles just for your stupid benchmark. Maybe they are. That's my evil plan is I just want a really good picture of a pelican riding a bicycle. And so if I can get all of the AI labs to compete, that's how I'm going to get one. But this person said, try a North Virginia opossum on an e-scooter. And GLM 5.1 did an animation of a North Virginia opossum on an e-scooter, and the caption says, cruising the Commonwealth since dusk, which is brilliant. And it's got a little earring, and in the code you can see a comment that says, earring sparkle, opossum fur gradient, distant tree-line silhouette of Virginia pines. This is so good. And none of the American models that I'd asked to draw me a North Virginia opossum on an e-scooter have come anywhere close to this. Like right now, GLM 5.1 is the best model if you want to draw a possum on an e-scooter from North Virginia, which I think is noteworthy. The other thing that came out in April was ChatGPT Images 2.0, which has at least 2 other names. But it is a really good image model. And somebody tried to stack all the tests, say, OK, we want a horse riding an astronaut, riding a pelican, riding a bicycle. And not only did the model do it, but the traffic sign in the background says, why are you like this? Which is genuinely, that's the first spark of AGI I have ever seen. Like, that's completely fair. Interesting, if you try that prompt a few different times, often you get like a neon sign in the background that says something spicy as well. Like there's something about that model thinks this is a stupid thing to do, which, I mean, again, fair. I want to talk a little bit about the open models. Qwen 3.6 35B A3B, beautiful model name there, came out almost the same day as Claude Opus 4.7, and it actually drew me a better Pelican. Like, that's what I got from the model running on my laptop, this new Chinese model. That's really good. Like, the bug's the right shape. The Pelican's got a bit of style. It says Pelican on a bicycle at the bottom. And then Claude 4.7 didn't even get the bicycle right. Like, that's a junk bicycle. That was, on the one hand, this was definitive proof that my benchmark is junk, because any benchmark that says that Opus 4.7 is better than a 20 gigabyte file running on my MacBook Pro is clearly missing something. But it was also a kind of interesting sign of the level of quality that these open weight models are now getting into. Yeah, I told Opus to think harder, and I don't think it worked because Opus has that new. Oh, and then I also did a flamingo on a unicycle. And again, I think Qwen's is better because that flamingo, I mean, it looks like it's smoking a joint, But again, it just feels. I like the unicycle better. The Opus one looks a bit too cyberpunk. So what can we learn from this? Not much, to be honest. But it's kind of interesting. And then the last Qwen model that came out in April was Qwen 3.6 27B. This thing is a beast. This is a 20 gigabyte file you can download from Hugging Face and you can run. It did a very good Pelican riding a bicycle. But more importantly, I've started plugging this. It's Opossum on an e-scooter wasn't quite GLM levels, but you know. But more importantly, I've been running actual agent stuff against this thing. I've been building my own agent recently that does SQL queries and builds simple HTML and JavaScript things. It's good. Like this 20 gigabyte model running on my laptop is giving me, it's the first time I've run a local model and it feels like the tool calling is good enough for the kinds of things I want to do with it. I think Qwen have figured out how to strip out a lot of the general knowledge. Like I've always wanted a model that's great at Python and tool calling and doesn't know who the king of Sweden was in 1750. Maybe they've cracked the code on that. I don't know. But that is a ferociously good model that's worth spending some time with. That's the thing. Open weight models got good. And the thing runs on my laptop, and it feels like GPT-4o did a year and a half ago. That's absolutely astonishing. I didn't think that would ever be possible. I thought you needed a giant wall of GPUs to get useful results out of these models, and now it turns out you don't. I did want to quickly bring up this idea of deep blue. This is the term we're starting to use for the existential crisis that is beginning to hit people in our profession and in other professions when, you know, the thing that you're so good at, the sort of speciality in your career, is no longer quite so special. Especially if you're somebody who's really good at taking a detailed spec and turning that into code, this is a very threatening time. If you can move beyond that, I feel the way I've recovered from my own sense of deep blue is the more time I spend working with coding agents, the harder I feel that it is. Like, because I can build so much more. I can take on much more ambitious projects. It's taking every inch of my 25 years of experience as a software engineer. I'm having to develop all of these new skills. I'm constantly reminded that building and shipping software is just a furiously difficult thing to do. It doesn't matter how much AI assistance you get to write bits of code and talk you through deployment and all of that. There's still just so much depth to what we're doing. And there was a quote that I had on a slide earlier. Here we go. This is Matthew Iglesias in a now deleted tweet. I don't know why he deleted it. Said, 5 months in, I think I've decided that I don't want to vibe code. I want professionally managed software companies to use AI coding systems to make more better, cheaper software products that they then sell to me for money. This is it. This is the savior of our entire career. But it's true. Like, I can learn how to do plumbing on YouTube. I hire a plumber. Most people are not interested in spending their time figuring out even the sort of simplest versions of vibe coding. And if you want to build production software that solves problems for thousands or millions of people, that will never be easy. I don't care how good the AI systems get. So this is why I'm not currently suffering from deep blue. The thing I am suffering from is this problem of cognitive load. Like, I can run 5, 10 agents in parallel. And if I do that, I'm exhausted by lunchtime because the amount of attention that you have for those different projects is finite. I think this is also something that saves software teams. If you want to have a small team working on a lot of projects, there is a limit to how much each of those human beings can process in terms of what you're trying to get these agents to do. But cognitive load is it's where we need that new balance. We need to figure out what makes sense, what we can take on, how ambitious should we be being. And it's the thing that we have to watch out for, because this is where you get to sort of AI-fueled burnout, is from just loading up too many things. But I wanted to end on an exciting note. The exciting thing is right now, we get to reinvent how we build software, because the way we built software in the past has always been predicated on the idea that lines of code are expensive. Like, a programmer can churn out 200 lines of tested, decent, robust code a day, if you're lucky. Now, we can churn out 2,000, 10,000 lines of tested code. If it's the right code, it's still up for debate. But as a result, everything in software has broken. Like, our design processes, our operations processes, everything we do needs to adapt to this. And it's very clear just from today, like, nobody confidently knows exactly what the future of software looks like. But we're on a roller coaster to figure it out. Like, right now, everything is open for us to reinvent how we're building things. A frustrating thing is I've noticed that anything somebody tries almost inevitably works. It's like the nature of these models is that you can come up with some bizarre prompting strategy or harness, and you throw it at a model, and if the model's a good reasoning model, it'll figure out how to get good results out of that itself. So it's notoriously difficult to measure these things, like try measuring engineering productivity. Now we're trying to throw a bunch of black box AI into the mix as well. But this is an exciting time, right? Getting to reinvent how we build software. I'm personally thrilled. I find that it's certainly not boring, and the every day some new challenge comes up that we get to solve. So this is why I'm excited, despite the deep blue and the cognitive load. If you want to hear more from me, all of my stuff is on simonwillison.net. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter and Mastodon and all of those places as well. But yeah, thank you very much for listening.